Hi everyone, today I'm making Campfire S'mores soap, and this soap uses the most techniques I've ever used to make one soap, so stick around and see what they all are. I'm starting out with my oils in my bucket and my lye water solution, and they're both at about 100 degrees. So I'm going to empty my lye water solution into my oils and bring them to emulsification with my spatula. Now before I add my essential oils, I'm going to separate out a small amount of my soap batter into a separate container for the first layer of soap. And now I'm going to go ahead and add my essential oils, and today I'm using a blend of frankincense, cedarwood, orange and vanilla, and this smells so good. It smells smoky and woodsy with just enough sweetness in the blend. I'm going to colour my small portion with some zinc oxide and some activated charcoal. It's going to make a nice stone grey colour. And I'm going to fully disperse that using my stick blender. And this first layer is going to be a sculpted layer, so I'm going to bring it all the way to a thick trace. I'm also going to make this in the pot swirl, so I'm going to separate a small part off and add a little bit more activated charcoal to make a darker grey colour. And I'm just going to disperse that with my spoon. The activated charcoal incorporates into the soap really easily, so there's no need to stick blend, and my stick blender doesn't fit in this container anyway. And so my first technique is an in the pot swirl. I'm going to pour the darker soap into the lighter soap and scrape out my container. And then I'm just going to pour that into my soap molds. And that brings us on to my second technique, a sculpted layer. And I've made a soap sculpting tool out of a plastic cutting mat. I've just drawn the design I want on the bottom and cut it out. So I'm pulling the sculpting tool along the length of my mould. I'm using this sculpting tool itself to remove any excess soap. So my third technique, I'm doing an activated charcoal pencil line in this soap, and it's a messy technique for sure, but it's going to differentiate the stone sculpted layer from the layer above it. Now that my pencil line is in, I'm going to add the next layer of soap, and I'm just spooning this in to make sure that I don't break my sculpted layer. And this layer is, as you can see, is a very dark grey. It's going to represent the ash from the fire. I've got all the soap in the mold, I'm just going to flatten it out with my spatula and make sure it goes all the way across the soap. So I'm now returning to the rest of my soap batter, and I'm going to divide it evenly between 3 different containers. And the rest of this soap is going to represent the fire. So it's going to be coloured red, orange and yellow. And I am just dividing this by eye. I'm not going to be specific enough to weigh it out. So for my red layer, I'm adding some paprika. For my orange layer, I'm going to add some paprika and some turmeric. And for my yellow layer, I'm adding some turmeric and some zinc oxide. And I'm going to disperse those with my spoon to make sure I'm happy with the depth of colour before I move on and disperse them with my stick blender. Now all of these colours are going to morph once the soap has fully cured. The orange in the turmeric is going to lighten, and the paprika, once I put it through gel phase, will turn a nice bright red. So my 4th technique is a textured layer, and I'm just using the spoon to create some texture in that ash layer under the fire. So the 5th technique, I am pouring the rest of this soap in layers. So I'm just using my spatula to break the fall of the soap. And I'm starting out with my yellow layer. So I'm going to go from lightest to darkest here. Moving on to my orange layer. And it's not going to completely break the fall, I haven't let the soap set up very much. And then moving on to my red layer. So that brings us to soap technique number 6. I am adding a drop swirl into each layer of the previous coloured layer, and that's going to help the colour differentiation. Now that all my soap is in the mould, I'm moving on to technique number 7, which, as I know it, is called a spoon swirl. I'm just using a gear tie and putting it down into the soap and moving it around in circles, and that will create some lovely little swirls in this soap. So it's time to make the marshmallows for the top of this soap, and I've just got some white soap dough which I'm rolling out. And that brings us on to soap technique number 8, which is soap dough. This is one that I'm very familiar with. I do it on a lot of my soaps. So I'm rolling my soap into little balls first and then flattening them into little columns. And I am squishing them a little bit so that the edges look just like little marshmallows. Now each soap is going to have 2 marshmallows, so I'm going to go ahead and make a lot more. Now the marshmallows are going to sit on a stick, so I have some wood grain soap dough that I have previously made, and I'm rolling out into a long stick And then I'm going to cut it into little shorter sticks so that each soap will have a marshmallow on a stick. And I'll insert the stick into the end of the marshmallow. So technique number 9. As I do with all of my soaps, I am texturing the top of this one, and I am using the back of my spoon. So I'm bringing the soap into the middle, into a peak, to represent the flames. Now that the soap is peaked, I'm going to add the little marshmallows onto the top. And each soap, as I said, is going to have 2 marshmallows, and I'm just laying those across the top between my 2 guidelines. This is a pretty tight fit. Those marshmallows are a little bit larger than was easy. I just love how these little marshmallows turned out. They look so realistic. I could just pluck one off the top and eat it. Now I am going to go and pop this soap into the oven to make sure it goes through gel and make that red very red. And the next day it's time to cut this loaf. So I'm lining it up with my multi-bar cutter to make sure that those marshmallows are in between the wires. And then I'm supporting it from the back to make sure it doesn't tip. And this is what one of those middle bars looks like. So you can see the red and orange layers are really nicely swirled together, with a nice kind of gradient between the orange and the yellow. And there's some nice definition with the grey stone layer and that dark grey ash. So it's time to pipe the campfire onto the front of this soap. And I have some more of that wood grain soap dough that I've rolled out into a stick, and I'm laying those onto the soaps to create the wood at the bottom of the fire. So I'm forming those on each soap while my soap frosting sets up. And that brings us on to soap technique number 10, the final one, soap piping. And I'm using a Wilton 365 leaf tip to create these flames, and I'm just putting it in an elongated pattern and a swervy pattern back and forward to create the flames, and then I'm laying my little wood pile back on top. So here's a closer look. And I am layering those flames so it creates a good depth in the fire. And I have created a two-tone effect with the flames, which is just starting to come through now. I made some darker orange and some yellow, and I just layered those in my piping bag, one on top of the other. And the final step I'm going to do to complete this soap is add some flames at the bottom of the soap over the wood. And here's a close-up of the finished product. This soap, I am so proud of how it turned out. I absolutely love it, with the little campfires in the middle and the s'mores on top.